or timeout green. They tell that fucking bullshit to the tourists.
Toby? Who the fuck is Toby?
Welcome to Things You Didn't Know, a series about things in movies you probably didn't know about. Quentin Tarantino may be known best for his second film, Pulp Fiction, and a few others, but many forget about his debut effort, Reservoir Dogs, a film that would introduce us to Quentin's unique non-linear storytelling along with his somewhat violent content, and was the beginning of one of the best directing careers in filmmaking history. Obviously, something so important must have a number of secrets to dive into. So here is 25 things you probably didn't know about Reservoir Dogs. It was almost low budget. Kicking things off where it all began, the now critically acclaimed film was almost produced with a budget of $30,000, along with a cheap camera and a crew consisting of his friends. But this all changed after the involvement of Harvey Keitel, who read the script after receiving a copy from his friend. He asked Tarantino if he could star in and produce the film, and due to his already established career, he essentially raised the budget of $30,000 to $15 million from investors. And I think we know how things turned out from there. The title's origin. For the longest time, nobody knew what Reservoir Dogs meant, as it didn't seem to really have any relevance. But the question was eventually answered as it came from a customer while Tarantino was working at a video store. Essentially, he recommended a movie with a title I will not pronounce, and he responded, "I don't want to see no Reservoir Dogs." And the rest is history. Monte Hellman almost directed. It's hard to imagine this being directed by anyone but Tarantino. However, an early mentor to Quentin, Monte Hellman, with established films like Two Lane Blacktop, was originally chosen to direct. The only problem was his career was starting to decline, and after the sequel to Silent Night, Deadly Night 3, well, those plans were essentially ended. And I think we can agree that was for the best. The premiere was a disaster. The movie originally premiered at the Sundance Film Festival on the 21st of January in 1992, and was a complete fucking disaster. First off, they didn't have a scope lens for the projector, and it's a scope movie, but he let them play it anyway because he didn't know they couldn't. This resulted in the film mainly looking like shit, but then during the climax the lights go up, so they bring them down, and literally at the most climactic scene, you know, the one with the standoff, there's a power outage. Almost everything that could go wrong, but I guess that's showbiz. Tim Roth was drunk during the audition. Originally, Tim Roth was not interested in the film due to already having a number of critically acclaimed roles. However, he did agree to go out drinking with Tarantino and Keitel, and after they were all effectively hammered, well, you might say he had a bit of a mind change, and finally agreed to the part of Mr. Orange. Not sure how that works, but definitely for the best. Tarantino was originally gonna play Mr. Pink. It's hard to imagine Mr. Pink as anybody but Steve Buscemi. Tarantino, who ended up playing the minor role of Mr. Brown, did originally plan on playing Mr. Pink himself, as most of the actors weren't bothered too much as to who they played, apart from Steve Buscemi, who specifically took interest in that role. So, Quentin told him he'd have to absolutely nail it to get the part, and well, I think we know how that turned out. Madonna disagreed with the interpretation of Like a Virgin. During the opening scene of the film, Mr. Brown theorizes that the song Like a Virgin is essentially about the pain of a virgin's first time. Madonna, after seeing the film and apparently enjoying it, did not agree with this. As a result, she sent Quentin a copy of her new album, Erotica, and signed it to Quentin. It's not about dick, it's about love. A good use of time, I guess. You may also notice Nice Guy Yeti never comments on the conversation. That's because his brother Sean Penn had previously been married to the singer for 4 years, and he didn't want to say anything bad about his former sister-in-law. Definitely the right move. James Woods' agent turned down a role without asking. Tarantino originally wanted James Woods to play an unspecified role, and offered his agent several different offers. However, he turned them all down without consulting him, as they were below his usual fee. When him and Quentin later met, and he learned of this, he was rightfully infuriated and the agent was promptly fired. The role itself is still unknown, as Quentin refuses to say what it is, as apparently the person who did play it was magnificent. A George Clooney addition to play Mr. Blonde. Sticking with the topic of actors who didn't make it, George Clooney, before making it big with the hit series ER, auditioned to play the part of Mr. Blonde, but was inevitably turned down. However, he would eventually get to work with Tarantino on From Dusk Till Dawn. And you know, based on that alone, maybe he would have done Mr. Blonde justice. Maybe. The torture scene was almost cut, and Wes Craven walked out. Harvey Weinstein felt the need to lobby to have the famous torture scene removed. Luckily, Tarantino wasn't having any of this, and he eventually backed down. Still, it did result in horror legend Wes Craven walking out, something Quentin apparently loved. Michael Madsen struggled to film the torture scene. Again, keeping on topic, Michael Madsen, despite appearing in many Tarantino movies, did not enjoy filming the aforementioned torture scene. He especially hated having to hit his fellow actor, and the improvised line about having kids at home definitely didn't help. Luckily, this cut still made the film, and he managed to hide his displeasure perfectly. It's hard to believe, but he's actually opposed to violence. The entire music budget was spent on Stuck in the Middle with You. It wouldn't have been a torture scene without the catchy song. However, it did not come cheap, as the entirety of the music budget was spent on securing the license. Definitely money well spent, but believe it or not, that's not the reason the intro song wasn't Money by Pink Floyd. No, he just heard Little Green Men on the radio and felt nostalgic, I guess. Mr. Blonde's dance was improvised. Refusing to get off the torture scene and all of its greatness, who would believe the guy who we now know was opposed to violence would improvise a dance? Well, believe it, because it was not scripted. Doesn't make much sense, but sometimes the best things don't. The film's heavily inspired by City on Fire. If you've seen the 1987 cult classic film City on Fire, you'll likely notice the resemblance, as it focuses on, you guessed it, a group of thieves preparing to execute a jewelry heist, along with an undercover cop and multiple copied scenes. The similarities are pretty much undeniable, but Tarantino has acknowledged this, expressing his love for the film and even dedicating Reservoir Dogs' script to Chow Yun-fat himself. Now that's what I call dedication. Lawrence annoyed everyone. Lawrence played the part of mob boss Joe, who was apparently a pain in the ass. Not only would he completely forget his lines and fuck up any scene he was in, but he also had a habit of goading the rest of the cast and nearly got into a fist fight with Michael Madsen. He did, however, get into an altercation with Tarantino himself and was nearly fired. Apparently, that received applause from the rest of the cast. It inspired character posters. Yes, the concept of character-specific posters actually started with Reservoir Dogs, as it was the first American film to do it in that fashion, in which each member of the heist received a poster with a color-themed name, along with a line of their most memorable dialogue. A strategy that not only made them money down the line, but also shows off that everybody wants to be front and center. No female speaks. Time to get the sexist pitchforks out, because there is not a lick of female dialogue in the movie. The only scene that featured a female speaking was inevitably cut. It featured McCluskey as a female character, meeting with Mr. Orange and discussing the men he'll be going undercover with. This was likely cut because it gave too much exposition, but keep in mind, while a female may not speak, one does shoot Mr. Orange, affecting the plot a great deal. A female Mr. Blonde. However, things could have turned out a lot different. Before Keitel essentially funded the movie, a lot of other offers came in if certain demands were met involving the plot, as one producer offered $1.5 million if it was revealed that they all survived the heist at the end and it was all part of the plan. That may sound different, but not as different as the offer of $500,000 if the producer's girlfriend could play Mr. Blonde. The idea was so crazy it was briefly considered. Imagine that. The cop was driven around for real. There really is nothing like authenticity. Hans really being dropped in Die Hard, the birds in the birds being real birds, and the cop in Reservoir Dogs actually being taken for a ride. As an attempt to get into character, Michael Madsen deliberately ran through potholes and stopped at a Taco Bell drive-thru, because that was definitely in the script. But that's okay, because I think most of that was agreed on. Mr. Blue was played by a real criminal. The only guy without sunglasses, Mr. Blue, played by Edward Bunker, definitely had the least prominent role. Because unlike Mr. Brown, we don't even see his death, as it was cut, obviously due to the budget. However, it's worth noting that he was in fact a real-life criminal, commonly in trouble with the law at a young age, and was imprisoned in San Quentin at the age of 17, the youngest age ever. Luckily, after being paroled in 1975, he would go on to become an author, actor, and technical advisor on crime films. An impressive feat indeed. Despite this, he would in later interviews state the heist plan was implausible, as meeting in plain sight with that type of clothing would essentially be a bad idea. Mr. Blonde is Vincent Vega's brother. Tarantino has made it most obvious that his films are connected, and recently confirmed that Mr. Blonde's Vince Vega is the brother of Pulp Fiction's Vincent Vega. I mean, do you think it was a coincidence? If you're not gonna make sequels, no, that doesn't count, why not connect them? There was apparently gonna be a sequel titled Double V Vega, which sounds fucking awesome, but Tarantino, unlike Disney, understands the concept of age and found the idea to be a bit implausible. 'Cause it's a prequel. They're supposed to be younger. There's an ad for Jackrabbit Slims. If that wasn't enough to prove the connection, there is in fact an ad for Jackrabbit Slims. An Easter egg that's very easy to miss, but it is in fact the name of the car-themed diner that Vincent Vega and Mia visit in Pulp Fiction. That's what I call universe building at its finest. Samuel L. Jackson auditioned for Mr. Orange. The most notable actor that didn't make the cut is Samuel L. Jackson himself. He did get to audition for the part of Mr. Orange, but claims that despite memorizing the lines perfectly, Tarantino and the crew were joking around and threw him off. But that's okay, because not only does he return to share the lead in Pulp Fiction, but also appears prominently in many of Tarantino's movies, including Jackie Brown, Django Unchained, The Hateful Eight, and even a brief appearance in Kill Bill Volume 2, as the pianist. 421 uses of profanity. This shouldn't be a surprise, but considering the relatively short 99-minute runtime, maybe it is. Not only are expletives used 421 times, but 269 of them include the word, well, it's gonna look kinda dumb if I say it now, but you know what it is. It's also the 27th highest usage of the word in movie history. Another impressive feat indeed. No one shot Nice Guy Yeti. Yes, the cinematic conclusion is fucked. Cause if you watch very carefully, you'll notice nobody actually shoots Chris Penn's character of Nice Guy Yeti. To simplify this confusing concept, it was a mistake, Penn later explained to Empire. Harvey Keitel's supposed to shoot Lawrence Tierney, then shoot me, But what happened was the squib, a mini explosive device used to simulate gunfire, on Harvey went off right after he shot Lawrence. So he went down. But my squib went off anyway, so I went down. Basically, nobody shot Nice Guy Yeti. Quentin then said, you know what? It'll be the biggest controversy of the film. We're leaving it in. You know what? He was definitely right. And there it is, 25 things you probably didn't know about Reservoir Dogs. Well, I'm guessing you knew a few of these, but whatever. There is obviously going to be a lot of trivia on this, and if one thing's clear, the film could have been a lot different. As to how that would have turned out, we'll never know. It's hard to imagine some of these changes, but I feel if Samuel L. Jackson was actually in the movie, you'd probably think that was meant to be too. Anyway, I'm the analyst, and remember kids, if you don't like violence, then just make your own fucking movie. So, you made it to the end, an impressive feat indeed. Since you managed that, consider checking out the gaming channel, in which I cover a variety of gaming topics, like in-depth gameplay, and analysis videos like this one. If you want to see that, then press the link in the description. It's that simple.